The flak hit at 27,000 feet. Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown heard the explosion before he felt it. Metal screaming, wind howling, cold air rushing into the cabin. He looked back. The tail section was gone. Not damaged. Gone. Ripped off by an 88mm shell. Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode had been in the tail, had been manning the tail guns. Brown did not need to ask if Eckenrode was alive. Nobody survived a direct hit from flak. Brown turned back to the controls. He had 9 other men depending on him. 9 men who needed to get home. It was December 20th, 1943. The mission was Bremen, a city in northern Germany. The target was a Focke-Wulf aircraft factory. The Americans wanted it destroyed. Brown's bomber was part of a formation of 300 B-17s. They called the B-17 the Flying Fortress. It was supposed to be indestructible. It was not indestructible. Brown had watched 12 bombers go down on the way to the target. 12 aircraft. 120 men. Some got out. Most did not. Brown watched them fall. Watched the parachutes open. Watched the fighters circle back and strafe the parachutes. Some pilots did that. Not all. But some. Brown thought about that. About men shooting other men while they floated helpless in the air. He thought war was supposed to have rules. It did not have rules anymore. The second hit came 30 seconds later. The No. 3 engine exploded. Shrapnel tore through the right wing. Fuel poured out. The bomber lurched to the right. Brown grabbed the controls, pulled left. The aircraft did not respond. He pulled harder. The yoke was stiff, frozen. He looked at his co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Spencer Luke. Luke was unconscious, blood running down his face. A piece of shrapnel had gone through the windscreen and hit him in the head. Brown reached over, shook him. Luke did not move. Brown was alone now, alone with a dying aircraft and 9 men who could not fly. The third hit came from a fighter, a German Focke-Wulf 190. It came in from the right. Cannon fire, 20mm shells. They walked across the fuselage, punched through the aluminum like paper. Brown heard the screaming. It was coming from the waist section. He picked up the intercom. Who was hit? The screaming got louder. Then it stopped. Brown did not know who had died. He would find out soon. Too soon. The bomber was falling. Brown looked at the altimeter. 20,000 feet. 19,000. 18,000. He pulled back on the yoke. Nothing. The controls were not responding. He looked at the wings. The flaps were stuck. The ailerons were damaged. He had no control over the roll, no control over the pitch. The bomber was a brick with wings, falling out of the sky. 15,000 feet, 12,000, 10,000. Brown thought about bailing out, about giving the order to abandon aircraft. He looked at the bailout bell. He could ring it. The crew would jump. They would take their chances with the parachutes, with the German fighters, with the civilians on the ground who sometimes killed downed airmen. Brown reached for the bell. He stopped. Luke was unconscious. Luke could not bail out. If Brown bailed out, Luke would die. Brown pulled his hand back. He would ride the aircraft down. He would try to crash land. He would probably die. But Luke would not die alone. 8,000 feet, 6,000, 4,000. The ground was rushing up. Brown could see trees, fields, a village. He pulled back on the yoke, pulled with everything he had. The nose came up. Slightly, just slightly. It was not enough. They were going to hit. Brown closed his eyes. He thought about his mother, about his hometown in West Virginia, about the girl he had kissed before shipping out. He thought about how he was 21 years old and he was about to die in a field in Germany and nobody would know where he was buried. The bomber leveled out at 200 feet. Brown opened his eyes. He did not know how. The controls had not responded. The flaps had not moved. But the aircraft had leveled out. Brown looked at the altimeter. 150 feet, 100 feet. They were flying. Barely flying, but flying. Brown exhaled. He had been holding his breath. He did not know for how long. He checked the engines. No. 3 was dead. No. 4 was dying. Black smoke pouring out. The oil pressure was dropping. It would seize in minutes, maybe seconds. No. 1 and No. 2 were running. Barely. The fuel gauges were showing empty. They were not empty. There was fuel, but the fuel lines were damaged. The engines were not getting enough fuel. Brown did not know how much time he had. Not long. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe 5. He looked at the compass. The formation had gone west. Back to England. Back to the base at Kimballton. Brown was not with the formation. He had fallen behind. He was alone. Alone over Germany at 100 feet with a crippled aircraft and no fighter escort. Brown calculated the distance. 250 miles to the coast. Another 100 miles across the North Sea to England. 350 miles total. At 150 miles per hour, that was 2 hours and 20 minutes. Brown looked at the fuel gauges again. He did not have 2 hours. He had maybe 30 minutes. Maybe less. He picked up the intercom. All crew check in. The responses came back. Top turret gunner Robert Andrews, alive. Ball turret gunner Hugh Beatlick, alive. Navigator Alfred Sadok, alive. Bombardier Peter Engel, alive. Flight engineer Walter Trzaskowski, alive. Radio operator Richard Petchute, alive. Waist gunner Samuel Blackford, alive. Co-pilot Spencer Luke, unconscious. Tail gunner Hugh Eckenrode, no response. Waist gunner Andrew Jensen, no response. Brown counted. 8 men alive. 2 men dead. Luke might die. Brown might die. They might all die. But right now, 8 men were breathing. Brown was going to keep them that way. He had to check the damage, had to know what they were dealing with. Brown unbuckled his harness, told Andrews to take the controls. Andrews climbed down from the top turret, grabbed the yoke. Brown crawled back through the narrow catwalk over the bomb bay. His hands were shaking. He did not know if it was from cold or fear. Probably both. He reached the radio room, opened the door. The blood hit him first. The smell, copper and meat. It was everywhere. On the walls, on the floor, on the ceiling. Brown stepped inside. Petchute was sitting against the bulkhead. His shoulder was torn open. His chest was bleeding. Blackford was next to him, pressing bandages against the wounds. The bandages were soaked through, red and wet. Blackford looked up at Brown. His face was pale. He said, "Petchute needs a hospital." Brown nodded. He said, "We all need a hospital. Just keep pressure on it." Brown looked at the other side of the radio room, at what was left of Andrew Jensen. Jensen had taken a 20-millimeter shell to the chest. The shell had not exploded. It had gone straight through, taken most of Jensen's torso with it. His body was against the wall. His legs were on the floor 3 feet away. Brown stared. He could not stop staring. Jensen had been laughing that morning at breakfast, showing everyone pictures of his dog back home, a golden retriever named Sam. Jensen had talked about Sam every day, about how Sam would run to meet him when he got home, about how Sam slept at the foot of his bed. Brown looked at Jensen's face. His eyes were open, still staring at nothing. Brown turned away. His stomach heaved. He vomited on the floor. There was nothing in his stomach, just bile, just acid. He wiped his mouth. His hand was shaking. His whole body was shaking. He looked at Blackford. Blackford was looking at Jensen, tears running down his face, not making a sound, just tears. Brown said, "We have to keep moving." Blackford nodded, did not look away from Jensen. Brown crawled back to the cockpit. He could not get the image out of his head. Jensen's legs, 3 feet away from his body. Brown thought he would see that image for the rest of his life, however long that was. Andrews was still holding the controls. Brown took them back. His hands were still shaking. He gripped the yoke harder. The shaking got worse. He thought about Jensen, about the dog named Sam, about how Sam would wait at the door, about how Sam would never see Jensen again. Brown closed his eyes, saw Jensen's body, opened his eyes. He could not unsee it. He would never unsee it. He looked out the windscreen. The German countryside was rushing past. He was flying so low he could see people, farmers, villagers. They were looking up, pointing. Some were running. Brown thought they were running for guns, running to shoot at him. He was wrong. They were running for shelter. They thought he was going to crash into their village. Brown adjusted course, flew around the village. He was not going to kill civilians. Not today. Not ever. The number 4 engine died. The propeller stopped. The bomber slowed. Brown pushed the throttles forward on the remaining 2 engines. They roared. The bomber accelerated. Not much. Enough. Brown was flying at 120 miles per hour now. That gave him more time. Maybe 40 minutes. Still not enough. He looked at Luke. The co-pilot was still unconscious, still bleeding. Brown reached over, checked his pulse. It was weak, but steady. Luke was alive. Brown did not know if he would stay alive. Head wounds were bad. Sometimes men woke up. Sometimes they did not. Brown had seen both. He hoped Luke would wake up. He hoped they would both survive this. He did not think they would, but he hoped. He checked the altimeter again. 75 feet. He was losing altitude. The bomber was too heavy, too damaged. It wanted to fall. Brown pulled back on the yoke. The nose came up slightly. The bomber climbed to 100 feet. Brown held it there. His arms were aching. The yoke was fighting him. He had been fighting the controls for 15 minutes. It felt like 15 hours. He did not know how much longer he could hold on. He looked at the compass. They were heading west. Good. England was west. But between here and England was the German coast. Between here and England were flak batteries. Between here and England were fighter bases. Brown thought about the odds. They were not good. They were terrible. But terrible odds were better than no odds. Brown kept flying. The first fighter appeared at 13 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. Brown saw it in his peripheral vision, a small black dot, growing larger, coming closer. Brown's chest tightened. He picked up the intercom. Fighter, 9 o'clock high. The gunners scrambled. Andrews tried to swing the top turret. It would not move. The hydraulics were dead. Beatlick tried to rotate the ball turret. It would not rotate. The motor was shot out. Blackford ran to the waist gun, grabbed it, tried to aim. The gun was jammed. Shrapnel had bent the barrel. It would not fire. They were defenseless. Brown watched the fighter. It was a Messerschmitt 109, German, fast, deadly. It was diving toward them. Brown could not evade. He was too low, too slow. If he turned, he would hit the ground. If he climbed, he would stall. He could only fly straight into the guns. Brown thought, this is it. This is how it ends. Shot down by a fighter 70 miles from safety. He thought about his mother again, about the telegram she would get, about how it would say, missing in action, about how she would spend the rest of her life not knowing. Brown did not want her to spend the rest of her life not knowing, but he could not tell her. He would be dead. The Messerschmitt came closer, closer. Brown could see the markings, black crosses on silver wings. He could see the pilot. The pilot was looking at him, looking right at him. Brown looked back. He thought, this is the man who is going to kill me. This is the last face I will see. The Messerschmitt was 200 yards away. 100 yards. 50 yards. Brown waited for the guns, waited for the cannon fire, waited to die. The guns did not fire. The Messerschmitt flew past, right past the nose. So close Brown could see the pilot's eyes, blue eyes. The pilot did not shoot. He just looked. Then he pulled up, climbed, disappeared into the sun. Brown exhaled. He had been holding his breath again. He did not understand. Why had the pilot not shot? Why had he let them go? Brown did not know. He would not know for 47 years. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler had been on the ground for 6 minutes. He was sitting in the cockpit of his Messerschmitt 109. The engine was cooling, ticking, making the sounds engines make after they have been running hot. Stigler was not moving. His hands were still on the stick. His feet were still on the rudder pedals. He was sitting there because if he got out of the cockpit, he would have to talk to someone. If he talked to someone, they would ask him about the mission. If they asked him about the mission, he would have to lie. Stigler did not want to lie. Not yet. He needed a minute. Just 1 minute to think about what he had just done. 20 minutes ago, Stigler had taken off to intercept American bombers. 20 minutes ago, his job was simple. Find a bomber, shoot it down, land, refuel, take off again, repeat until the bombers stopped coming or until he was dead. That was the job. Stigler had done that job 27 times. 27 confirmed kills. 27 bombers shot down. 27 crews killed. Stigler tried not to think about the crews. Tried not to think about the men inside the bombers. If he thought about the men, he would have to think about their families. If he thought about their families, he would have to think about his own family, about his brother August, about how August had been a bomber pilot, about how August had been shot down over North Africa, about how August was dead. Stigler's crew chief was walking toward the aircraft. His name was Heinrich Müller. He was 50 years old, too old to fight, too experienced to waste. He maintained Stigler's fighter, kept it flying, kept it killing. Müller stopped next to the wing. He looked at Stigler. He said, "The engine sounds good. No problems." Stigler nodded. Müller waited. He was waiting for Stigler to tell him about the kill, about the victory. Pilots always talked about their victories. It was tradition. You shot down a bomber and you told your crew chief, and your crew chief painted a mark on the fuselage, and everyone congratulated you, and you drank schnapps, and you went to sleep, and you woke up, and you did it again. That was how it worked. Stigler said there was no kill. Müller frowned. He said, "I saw you take off. I saw you fly west. You were gone for 15 minutes. You must have found something." Stigler shook his head. He said, "I found nothing." Müller looked at him, looked at the ammunition counters on the wings. The guns had not been fired. Not one round. Müller said, "You did not fire." Stigler said there was nothing to fire at. Müller did not believe him. Stigler could see it in his face. But Müller did not argue. Müller was Luftwaffe. Luftwaffe did not question officers, even when the officers were lying. Stigler unbuckled his harness, climbed out of the cockpit. His legs were stiff. He had been flying for 3 hours before this mission. 3 hours of combat air patrol, circling, waiting, watching for bombers. He was tired. His back ached. His eyes burned. He wanted to sleep. He could not sleep. There would be more bombers. There were always more bombers. The Americans sent them every day, hundreds of them. The Luftwaffe shot them down by the dozens. It did not matter. The Americans had more bombers. The Luftwaffe was running out of pilots. Stigler walked to the operations tent. Inside, Major Gustav Rödel was studying a map. Rödel was Stigler's squadron commander. He was also Stigler's friend. They had flown together in North Africa. They had fought together in Sicily. They had survived together when most of their friends had died. Rödel looked up. He said, "Did you get one?" Stigler shook his head. He said, "No contact." Rödel frowned. He said, "The radar showed bombers in your sector." Stigler said, "I must have missed them." Rödel looked at him the way Müller had looked at him. The way that said, "I know you are lying, but I am not going to call you a liar." Rödel said, "You are 1 kill away from the Knight's Cross. 1 more and you get the medal. You get the recognition. You get the promotion." Stigler nodded. He knew. He had known for weeks. The Knight's Cross was the highest decoration Germany gave for bravery. 28 kills. That was the threshold. Stigler had 27. He needed 1 more. Just 1 more bomber. 1 more crew. 1 more group of men who would never go home. Stigler thought about the American bomber he had just seen, the one he had let go. If he had shot it down, he would have his 28th kill. He would have his Knight's Cross. He would have everything he was supposed to want. He did not shoot it down. He did not know why. That was the problem. He did not know why. Rödel was still looking at him. Rödel said, "Are you all right?" Stigler said, "Yes. I am fine. Just tired." Rödel nodded. He said, "Get some rest. There will be more bombers this afternoon." Stigler said, "Yes, sir." He walked out of the tent. He did not go to his bunk. He walked to the edge of the airfield, stood there, looked at the sky, thought about the American bomber. 15 minutes ago, Stigler had been flying at 4,000 meters. He had been low on fuel, low on ammunition. He had used most of his ammunition on the first mission. He had been returning to base when he saw the bomber. It was flying at 100 meters, maybe lower. It was alone. No escort, no formation, just one bomber. Stigler thought it was bait. The Americans sometimes did that. Sent a crippled bomber low to draw in fighters. Then the escort would drop down and shoot the fighters. Stigler looked around, scanned the sky. No escort, no trap, just the bomber. Stigler dove, lined up his shot, came in from behind and above. That was the standard approach. Come in fast, fire, break away. Do not give the gunners time to aim. Do not give them time to react. Stigler was 200 meters away, 100 meters, 50 meters. He could see the bomber clearly now. It was a B-17, American, 4 engines, except 2 of the engines were dead. The tail was gone. The fuselage was full of holes, holes the size of cars. Stigler could see inside the bomber, could see the men, could see them moving, could see the blood. Stigler moved closer, came alongside the bomber, flew wing to wing, 20 meters apart, close enough to see the pilot. The pilot was young, maybe 20, maybe younger. His face was pale, his eyes were wide. He looked terrified. He looked at Stigler. Stigler looked back. The pilot thought Stigler was going to shoot. Stigler could see it in his face. The pilot was waiting to die. Stigler put his hand on the gun trigger. The trigger was right there. One squeeze, one burst. The bomber would explode. The crew would die. Stigler would have his 28th kill. He would have his Knight's Cross. He would have everything. Stigler did not squeeze the trigger. He thought about his brother, about August, about how August had been shot down, about how August had been in a bomber just like this one, about how someone had shot him down, about how that someone probably got a medal, about how that someone probably celebrated. Stigler wondered if that someone ever thought about August, ever thought about the man he killed. Probably not. Pilots did not think about the men they killed. If they thought about the men, they would go insane. Stigler thought about something Rodel had told him, back in North Africa. Rodel had said, if you ever shoot a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself. Rodel had been serious. Shooting a man in a parachute was murder. The man was defenseless. He could not fight back. He could not escape. Shooting him was not combat. It was execution. Stigler looked at the American bomber, at the holes in the fuselage, at the dead engines, at the missing tail. The bomber was not fighting. It could not fight. The guns were not firing. The bomber was defenseless. Shooting it would be like shooting a man in a parachute. It would be murder. Stigler pulled back on the stick, climbed above the bomber, came back down on the left side, flew alongside again. He looked at the pilot. The pilot was still looking at him, still waiting to die. Stigler shook his head. He pointed west, toward England. He was telling the pilot to go, to fly to England, to get out of Germany. The pilot did not understand. Stigler pointed again, more emphatically. Go, get out, save yourself. The pilot still did not understand. Or maybe he did understand, but he could not believe it. Could not believe a German fighter was letting him go. Stigler looked down. German flak batteries were on the ground below. They could see the bomber. They could see Stigler. They were probably wondering why Stigler was not shooting. They might shoot the bomber themselves. If they shot the bomber, Stigler's choice would not matter. The crew would die anyway. Stigler moved closer to the bomber, flew right next to it, 20 feet apart. If the flak guns fired now, they would hit Stigler too. The flak guns did not fire. They were not stupid. They were not going to risk hitting a German fighter. Stigler flew alongside the bomber for 10 minutes. 10 minutes through German airspace. 10 minutes of protecting an enemy. 10 minutes of treason. If anyone found out what he was doing, he would be court-martialed. He would be shot. His family would be disgraced. His mother would be ashamed. His friends would call him a traitor. Stigler knew all of this. He did not care. He could not shoot the bomber. He could not kill those men. Not today. Not like this. They reached the coast. The North Sea stretched out ahead. Gray water. Cold water. Deadly water. If the bomber ditched in that water, the crew would be dead in minutes. Hypothermia. Drowning. The water was 4 degrees. No one survived 4-degree water. Stigler hoped the bomber would make it to England, hoped it would not ditch, hoped the crew would live. He had no way of knowing if they would. He would never know. Stigler pulled back on the stick, climbed, turned east, back toward Germany, back toward his base. He looked down at the bomber one last time. It was still flying, still heading west, still alive. Stigler saluted. He did not know why. It just felt right, like something that needed to be done. Then he pushed the throttle forward, flew home. When he landed, he told Muller there was no kill. He told Rodel there was no contact. He told no one the truth. He could not tell the truth. The truth would get him killed. Stigler decided he would never tell anyone. He would take it to his grave. It would be his secret, his burden, his choice. He thought about the American pilot, about the young man with the terrified eyes. He wondered if that pilot would survive, wondered if he would make it home, wondered if he would ever think about the German fighter that let him go. Probably not. The pilot probably thought it was luck, a malfunction, a miracle. He would never know it was a choice made by a man who could not pull the trigger. Stigler walked back to his bunk. He lay down. He did not sleep. He stared at the ceiling. He thought about his brother. He thought about the American bomber. He thought about the choice he had made. He did not know if it was the right choice. He would never know. The German fighter came back. Brown saw it 2 minutes after it had disappeared. A black dot dropping out of the sun, coming straight at them. Brown's chest tightened. He grabbed the intercom. Fighter returning. Same one. 9 o'clock. The gunners moved to their positions, realized again their guns would not fire, realized again they were defenseless. Brown thought maybe the German pilot had been checking his guns, making sure they worked. Now he was coming back to finish the job. Brown pulled back on the yoke, tried to climb. The bomber would not climb. It was too heavy, too damaged. Brown could only watch the fighter approach, watch death coming. The Messerschmitt came in fast. Then it slowed, matched speed with the bomber, flew alongside, 20 feet away. So close Brown could see the pilot's face again. The pilot was not looking at Brown. He was looking at the bomber, at the damage, at the holes, at the missing tail. The pilot's face was strange, not angry, not hostile. Something else. Brown did not know what. The pilot looked at Brown, made a gesture, pointed his thumb, pointed north. Brown did not understand. The pilot pointed again, more insistently. North. Brown looked north, saw nothing. Just sky, just clouds. The pilot kept pointing. Brown suddenly understood. Sweden. The pilot was telling him to fly to Sweden. Sweden was neutral. If Brown landed in Sweden, his crew would be interned. They would sit out the war, but they would live. They would not be shot. They would not be prisoners. They would be safe. Brown shook his head. He pointed west, toward England, toward home. He was not flying to Sweden. He was going home. The pilot looked at him for a long time. Then the pilot nodded. He understood. The American was going home. The German pilot pulled back on his stick, climbed, disappeared again. Brown exhaled. He thought that was it. The German was leaving. The German had given him a chance. Brown had refused. Now the German was gone. Brown kept flying west, kept fighting the controls, kept hoping. The Messerschmitt came back 30 seconds later. This time it came from the right, dropped down next to the bomber, flew alongside again, even closer than before, 15 feet away, 10 feet. Brown could see the rivets on the fighter's fuselage, could see the exhaust stains on the wings, could see the pilot's eyes, blue eyes. The pilot was not pointing anymore. He was just flying next to them. Brown did not understand what was happening, did not understand why the German was still here, why he was not shooting, why he was not leaving. Then Brown looked down, looked at the ground below, saw the German flak batteries, saw the guns tracking the bomber, saw them preparing to fire. Brown understood. The German pilot was protecting them. Flying so close the flak guns could not shoot without risking hitting their own fighter. The German pilot was shielding them. Brown looked at the pilot, The pilot looked back. Brown did not know what to do, did not know what to say. He was in a bomber. The pilot was in a fighter. They were enemies. They were supposed to kill each other. That was the war. That was the job. But the German was not killing him. The German was saving him. Brown thought about gesturing, about thanking him somehow. He did not gesture. He just looked at the man who was risking his life to save Brown's life. Looked at the man who would probably be shot if anyone found out what he was doing. Brown wondered why. Why would a German pilot save an American crew? Why would he risk everything for strangers, for enemies? Brown did not know. He would not know for decades. Behind Brown in the waist section, Blackford was watching the fighter. He did not understand either. He was pressing bandages against Petchut's wounds, trying to keep Petchut alive. The bandages were soaked through. Petchut was pale. His breathing was shallow. He kept asking about the nurse, about the girl in London, about whether he would see her again. Blackford kept saying, "Yes, you will see her. You will marry her. You will have children. You will grow old together." Blackford did not believe it. Petchut was dying slowly. The shrapnel had hit an artery. Maybe his lung. Maybe both. Blackford could not stop the bleeding, could only slow it. Petchut needed a hospital, needed surgery, needed things Blackford could not give him. Blackford looked out the waist window, looked at the German fighter, thought about how strange war was, how one German was trying to kill them, how another German was trying to save them, how you could not tell by looking which German was which. Blackford wondered if the pilot knew what he was risking, knew what would happen if he was caught. Probably the pilot knew, and did it anyway. Blackford thought that took more courage than shooting, more courage than killing. It took courage to refuse, to say no, to choose mercy when everyone around you chose death. Luke woke up. Brown did not notice at first. He was watching the German fighter, watching the ground, watching the fuel gauges dropping. Then Luke groaned. Brown looked over. Luke's eyes were open, barely open. Luke said, "Where are we?" Brown said, "Over Germany, heading home." Luke said, "What is that?" He was looking at the Messerschmitt. Brown said, "A German fighter." Luke said, "Why is he not shooting?" Brown said, "I do not know." Luke looked at the fighter, looked at Brown, said, "Are we dead? Is this heaven?" Brown said, "No, we are not dead. Not yet." Luke closed his eyes again, said, "Wake me when we get home." He did not wake up. His breathing was steady. He was alive. Brown thought that was good, thought that was enough. The Messerschmitt stayed with them for 12 minutes. 12 minutes through German airspace. 12 minutes past flak batteries and radar stations and German troops on the ground. Brown thought about what those troops were seeing, were thinking. They were seeing a German fighter escorting an American bomber. Not attacking, escorting. Someone would report that. Someone would ask questions. The pilot would have to answer those questions. Brown did not know what the pilot would say, did not know how the pilot would explain. Brown thought the pilot was going to die for this, die for helping an enemy, die for choosing mercy. Brown thought that was the worst way to die, not in combat, not fighting, but executed by your own side for refusing to fight. They reached the coast. The North Sea appeared ahead. Gray water. Endless gray water. The Messerschmitt pulled up, climbed. The pilot looked at Brown one last time, raised his hand, saluted. Brown raised his hand, saluted back. He did not know if the pilot saw. The Messerschmitt rolled, turned east, disappeared into the clouds. Brown watched it go, watched until he could not see it anymore. Then he turned back to the controls, back to flying, back to trying to get home. The North Sea was 100 miles wide. At 120 miles per hour, that was 50 minutes. Brown looked at the fuel gauges. They showed empty. The engines were running on fumes, on vapor, on luck. Brown did not think they had 50 minutes of fuel, did not think they had 20 minutes. The engines were going to quit. Soon. Maybe very soon. Brown thought about ditching, about putting the bomber down in the water. The crew had life rafts. They had survival gear, but the water was 4 degrees. Even with life rafts, they would be dead in 10 minutes, maybe 5. Brown had to reach land, had to reach England, had to make it. The number 1 engine quit at 30 miles from the coast, just quit. The propeller stopped turning. The bomber slowed, dropped. Brown pushed the throttle forward on the number 2 engine, the last engine, the only engine. It roared, black smoke poured out. The engine was dying, overheating, running too rich. It would seize any minute. Brown did not care. He needed every second, every foot, every inch. Brown could see the English coast now, could see the white cliffs, could see the land. 20 miles, 15 miles, 10 miles. The number 2 engine started making a grinding noise. The oil pressure dropped to 0. The temperature gauge was in the red. Brown kept the throttle forward, kept pushing. The engine was screaming, metal tearing, pistons breaking. The engine was destroying itself. Brown did not care. He needed 5 more miles, just 5 more miles. Then the engine could die. Then the bomber could die. Then Brown could die. But not yet. Not until they reached land. 5 miles from the coast, the engine seized, locked up, stopped. The propeller froze. The bomber went silent. The only sound was the wind rushing past the fuselage, past the holes, past the broken wings. The bomber was gliding now, gliding toward the coast, toward England, toward home. Brown pulled back on the yoke, held the nose up, tried to keep the glide ratio, tried to stretch the distance. The bomber was dropping, 100 feet per minute, 50 feet per minute. The coast was 3 miles away, 2 miles, 1 mile. They were not going to make it. Brown knew they were not going to make it. They were going to hit the water. They were going to ditch. They were going to die. The bomber crossed the coastline at 50 feet, 50 feet above the water, 50 feet above death. Brown saw land, saw fields, saw trees, saw a road. He aimed for the road. No, not the road. A field, a plowed field. Soft earth, better than trees, better than buildings, better than rocks. Brown put the nose down, lined up the field. The bomber was dropping fast, too fast. They were going to hit hard, very hard. Brown grabbed the intercom. Brace for impact. Brace. Brace. He did not know if anyone heard, did not know if it mattered. The field was rushing up, closer, closer. Brown pulled back on the yoke. The nose came up slightly. The tail hit first, ripped off. The fuselage hit, slammed into the earth. The bomber bounced, came down again, slid, plowed through the field, dirt spraying, metal screaming. The wings tore off. The nose crumpled. The cockpit collapsed. Everything went black. Brown woke up. He did not know how long he had been unconscious. Seconds, minutes. He was still in the cockpit, still strapped in. The windscreen was gone. Dirt and grass were inside the cockpit. He smelled smoke, fuel, fire. Brown unbuckled, climbed out, fell. His legs did not work. He crawled, got to his feet, looked at the bomber. It was in pieces. The fuselage was broken. The wings were torn off. The tail was gone. Smoke was pouring from what was left. Brown thought about the crew, about his men. He ran to the fuselage, climbed inside, started pulling men out. Andrews was unconscious. Brown dragged him out, laid him in the grass, went back. Beatlick was awake, crawling. Brown helped him out, went back. Sadok, Engel, Truskowski, all alive, all moving. Brown kept going, kept pulling them out. Blackford was still in the waist section, still holding Pichut. Pichut was not moving. Brown said, "We have to go. The bomber is going to explode." Blackford said, "He is dead." Brown looked at Pichut, at the blood, at the pale face, at the empty eyes. Pichut was dead. The nurse in London would never see him again. Blackford was crying, not making noise, just tears. Brown pulled him up, pulled him out. They ran, got 50 feet away. The bomber exploded, a ball of fire, black smoke, orange flames. Brown and his crew lay in the grass, watched their bomber burn, watched everything burn. Brown thought about Jensen, about Eckenrode, about Petchut, about the 3 men who did not come home, about how they died trying, about how that had to count for something. It had to. The debriefing room smelled like cigarettes and coffee. Brown sat at a metal table. His commanding officer sat across from him. Colonel William Reed, 40 years old, gray hair, tired eyes. Reed had flown bombers in the First War. He knew what combat looked like. He knew what fear looked like. He was looking at Brown now, looking at the bandage on Brown's head, at the bruises on his face, at the 1,000-yard stare. Reed said, "Tell me what happened." Brown told him about the flak, about Eckenrode, about the engines failing, about falling to 100 feet, about the fighter, about the German pilot who did not shoot, about the escort, about the salute. Brown told him everything. Reed listened, did not interrupt. When Brown finished, Reed sat back in his chair, lit a cigarette, smoked half of it before he spoke. He said, "You are sure it was a German fighter?" Brown said, "Yes, sir. Messerschmitt 109, silver paint, black crosses." Reed said, "And he did not fire?" Brown said, "No, sir." Reed said, "And he escorted you through German airspace?" Brown said, "Yes, sir, for 12 minutes. Reed smoked the rest of his cigarette, stubbed it out, lit another one. He said, "Do you know what you are telling me?" Brown said, "Sir." Reed said, "You are telling me a German pilot committed treason. You are telling me he helped the enemy. You are telling me he risked his life to save yours." Brown said, "Yes, sir. That is what I am telling you." Reed stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the airfield, at the bombers being repaired, at the crews preparing for tomorrow's mission. He said, "If the Germans find out what that pilot did, they will execute him." Brown said, "I know, sir." Reed said, "If we tell this story, the Germans will find out. Someone will talk. Someone always talks. Stories like this spread. They get into newspapers. They get into letters home. They get to the enemy." Brown said, "Yes, sir." Reed turned around, looked at Brown, said, "So we are not going to tell this story." Brown said, "Sir." Reed said, "This is an order. You will not speak about the German pilot, not to your crew, not to other pilots, not to anyone. As far as anyone knows, you flew home alone. No fighter, no escort, no German, nothing. Do you understand?" Brown said, "I understand, sir." Reed said, "Good. You are dismissed." Brown stood up, walked to the door, stopped. He said, "Sir." Reed said, "Yes." Brown said, "What if he dies? What if the Germans execute him and nobody knows what he did? Nobody knows he chose mercy." Reed looked at Brown, looked at him for a long time. He said, "Then he dies like most heroes, unknown, unremembered, but not unimportant. What he did mattered. You are alive because of him. Your crew is alive because of him. That matters, even if nobody knows." Brown nodded. He said, "Yes, sir." He walked out. Brown did not tell his crew, did not tell them they could not talk about the German pilot. He did not need to. They already knew. Military secrets were not secrets because you were ordered to keep them. They were secrets because keeping them kept people alive. The crew understood. The German pilot had saved them. Talking about it would kill him. So they did not talk. They went to their bunks. They slept. They woke up. They flew again. They never spoke about December 20th, 1943. Never spoke about the German pilot. Never spoke about the choice he made. It became a silence, a shared silence, a silence that would last 47 years. Luke recovered. The head wound healed. The bleeding stopped. The doctor said he was lucky. The shrapnel had missed his brain by 2 millimeters, 2 millimeters between life and death, between waking up and never waking up. Luke did not feel lucky. He felt hollow. He remembered the mission, remembered being hit, remembered waking up and seeing the German fighter, remembered thinking he was in heaven. He was not in heaven. He was in a bomber over Germany with a pilot who should have killed him but did not. Luke asked Brown why. Why did the German let us live? Brown said, "I do not know." Luke said, "Do you think about him?" Brown said, "Every day." Luke said, "Me too." They did not speak about it again. Blackford could not stop thinking about Petchute, about the nurse in London, about how she would never know what happened. The official report said Petchut died in combat, killed by enemy fire. Heroic. That was true. That was also incomplete. Petchut had not died in the air. He had died in the waist section, bleeding out, asking about the girl he loved, taking 40 minutes to die, 40 minutes of pain, 40 minutes of fear, 40 minutes of knowing he would never see her again. The report did not say that. The report did not say anything about those 40 minutes. Blackford thought about writing to the nurse, about telling her Petchut's last words, about how Petchut had talked about her, about how Petchut had wanted to marry her. Blackford wrote the letter, read it, tore it up. What would it change? It would not bring Petchut back. It would just give the nurse more pain, more details, more things to think about at night. Blackford decided silence was kinder. He never sent the letter. Brown flew 23 more missions, 23 missions over Germany, over France, over occupied Europe. He never saw the German pilot again, never saw a Messerschmitt let a bomber go, never saw another act of mercy. Brown wondered if the pilot had been caught, if the pilot had been executed, if the pilot had died for choosing to save Brown's life. Brown would never know. He finished his tour, flew his last mission in March 1944, went home to West Virginia, to his mother, to his hometown, to the girl he had kissed before shipping out. The girl's name was Mary. She had waited for him. Brown did not know why. He had not written to her, had not promised her anything, but she had waited. They married in April, had 3 children. Brown worked in a coal mine, came home black every night, washed the coal dust off, sat at the dinner table, ate with his family, never talked about the war. Mary asked him once, asked what it was like. Brown said it was loud. That was all he said. Mary did not ask again. At night, Brown dreamed about the bomber, about the fighter, about the German pilot's blue eyes, about the salute. Brown would wake up, sit up in bed. Mary would ask if he was all right. Brown would say yes, go back to sleep. But he was not all right. He was thinking about the German pilot, about whether the pilot was alive, about whether the pilot thought about Brown, about whether the pilot knew Brown had survived. Brown wanted to find him, wanted to thank him, wanted to tell him his choice mattered. But Brown did not know the pilot's name, did not know his unit, did not know where he was stationed, did not know if he was alive, did not know anything. So Brown did not look. He lived his life, raised his children, grew old, and every night he dreamed about the blue eyes. The war ended. Germany surrendered. The pilots went home. Some of them. Most of them were dead. Brown read the casualty reports. 79,000 American airmen killed. 79,000. Brown thought about that number, about how big it was, about how small it made him feel. 79,000 men who did not come home. Brown had come home. Brown was alive. Brown had been saved by a German pilot. Brown wondered if that pilot was alive, if that pilot had come home, if that pilot was one of the 79,000. Brown would never know. Brown's children grew up, left home, had children of their own. Brown became a grandfather. He watched his grandchildren play, watched them laugh, watched them grow. He thought about the German pilot, about how that pilot had made this possible, had made Brown's life possible, had made Brown's children possible, had made Brown's grandchildren possible, all because the pilot had chosen not to shoot. Brown wanted his grandchildren to know that story, wanted them to know about mercy, about honor, about how even in war some men choose humanity. But Brown had been ordered not to tell, had been ordered to keep silent. So he kept silent. The story stayed locked inside him, a secret he would take to his grave. Except Brown did not take it to his grave. In 1986, Brown was 64 years old, retired, living in Florida. He read an article in a magazine. The article was about German fighter pilots, about their stories, about their memories. Brown thought about the German pilot, about the blue eyes, about the Messerschmitt, about December 20th, 1943. Brown thought maybe the pilot was still alive. Maybe the pilot remembered. Maybe the pilot wanted to know what happened to the American bomber. Brown decided to try, to look, to find him. Brown was not under orders anymore. The war was over, 43 years over. The German pilot could not be executed now, could not be punished. Brown could talk, could tell the story, could find the pilot. Brown placed an advertisement in a newsletter for German fighter pilots. The advertisement said, "I am looking for the pilot who escorted my B-17 on December 20th, 1943. The pilot flew a Messerschmitt 109. The pilot did not shoot. The pilot escorted us to the coast. I want to thank him." Brown included his address, mailed the advertisement, waited. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. No response. Brown thought maybe the pilot was dead. Maybe the pilot did not read newsletters. Maybe the pilot did not remember. Maybe Brown would never find him. Then in January 1990, a letter arrived. The letter was from Canada. The return address said, Franz Stigler. Brown opened the letter, read it. His hands were shaking. The letter said, "I am the pilot you are looking for. I remember your bomber. I remember December 20th. I remember you." Brown read the letter 3 times. He could not believe it. The pilot was alive. The pilot remembered. The pilot wanted to meet. Brown picked up the phone, called the number in the letter. A man answered. The man said, "This is Franz." Brown said, "This is Charlie." There was silence. Then Franz said, "I thought about you every day for 47 years. Brown said, "I thought about you too." They both started crying. 2 old men, 2 enemies, 2 strangers who had shared one moment 47 years ago, crying on the phone, crying because they were alive, crying because they had found each other, crying because the silence was finally over. They met in June 1990, at the Seattle airport. Brown flew from Florida. Stigler flew from Vancouver. They had arranged to meet at the arrival gate. Brown got there first. He stood near the gate, waiting. He was 68 years old now. Gray hair, wrinkled face, bad knees. He looked like a grandfather. He was a grandfather. He had 5 grandchildren. They called him Papa Charlie. They did not know he had been a bomber pilot. They did not know he had been saved by a German. They did not know about December 20th, 1943. Brown had never told them. Maybe he would tell them now. Maybe after this meeting. Maybe. Stigler's plane landed 20 minutes late. Brown watched the passengers come through the gate. Old people, young people, families, business travelers. Then he saw him, an old man, tall, thin, white hair, blue eyes, the same blue eyes Brown had seen through a cockpit window 47 years ago, the same blue eyes Brown had dreamed about every night since. Brown knew immediately. That was him. That was Stigler, the man who had saved his life. Stigler saw Brown at the same moment, saw an old man standing alone, staring at him. Brown's hair was gray, but Stigler recognized the face, the young, terrified face he had seen in the bomber, the face that had haunted him for 47 years. Stigler stopped walking, stood there. They looked at each other. 2 old men, 2 former enemies, 2 strangers who had shared one moment that changed both their lives. They did not move, did not speak, just looked. Then Stigler walked forward. Brown walked forward. They met in the middle. They did not shake hands. They hugged like brothers, like men who had survived something together, like men who understood each other in ways no one else could. People in the airport stopped, watched. 2 old men hugging and crying in the middle of an airport. Nobody knew why. Nobody asked. They went to a hotel, sat in the lobby, talked for 6 hours. Brown told his story. Stigler told his. They filled in the gaps, the missing pieces, the things they had wondered about for 47 years. Brown asked, "Why did you let us go?" Stigler said, "I could not shoot you. You were defenseless. It would have been murder." Brown said, "You risked your life." Stigler said, "Yes." Brown said, "Why?" Stigler looked at him. Said because my brother was a bomber pilot. His name was August. He was shot down over North Africa. Someone made the same choice I made. Someone looked at my brother's bomber and decided to shoot. I have thought about that person every day. I wondered if he ever thought about August, if he ever regretted it, if he ever wished he had chosen differently. I did not want to be that person. I did not want to be the man who killed someone's brother. Brown sat back in his chair. He had not known about August, had not known Stigler had lost a brother, had not known the choice was personal. Brown said, "I am sorry about your brother." Stigler said, "I am sorry about your crew, about the men who died." Brown said 3 men, Jensen, Eckenrode, Petchute. Stigler nodded, said, "I saw the damage. I knew some of your crew was dead. I am sorry I could not save them too." Brown said, "You saved 7 men. That is enough. That is more than enough." They talked about what happened after. Brown told Stigler about the debriefing, about Colonel Reed's order, about the silence, about 43 years of not being able to tell anyone. Stigler told Brown about returning to base, about lying to his crew chief, about lying to Rodel, about thinking he would be caught, about living in fear for months, waiting for someone to report him, waiting for the Gestapo to arrest him. They never came. Nobody reported him. Maybe nobody saw. Maybe they saw and said nothing. Stigler would never know. Stigler told Brown about the rest of the war, about flying missions until May 1945, about watching Germany lose, about watching his friends die, about the final days when there was no fuel, no ammunition, no hope. Stigler said, "I flew my last mission in April 1945. It was a suicide mission. We were supposed to ram American bombers, use our fighters as weapons. I took off. I climbed. I saw the bombers. I thought about you, about your crew, about the choice I made. I turned around. I landed. I told my commander the engine failed. He did not believe me. But the war was ending. Nobody cared anymore. 1 week later, Germany surrendered. I went home. Brown said what happened after the war. Stigler said I had nothing. No job, no money, no future. Germany was destroyed. I decided to leave. I moved to Canada, started over, worked as a businessman, got married, had children, lived a normal life. But I thought about you every day. Wondered if you survived. Wondered if you made it home. Wondered if you thought about me. Brown said I thought about you every day too. Every single day. Stigler said I wanted to find you. Wanted to know if you were alive. But I did not know your name. Did not know your unit. Did not know anything. Brown said I did not know your name either. Not until I got your letter. Stigler smiled. Said, and now here we are. 47 years later. 2 old men. Still alive. Brown said yes. Still alive. Because of you. They spent 3 days together. Went to a restaurant. Walked around Seattle. Talked about their lives. Their families. Their regrets. Their hopes. Brown introduced Stigler to his wife Mary. Mary shook Stigler's hand. Said, "Thank you for saving my husband." Stigler said, "I did what anyone should do." Mary said, "No. Most people would have shot. You chose mercy. That makes you rare." Stigler did not know what to say. He had never thought of himself as rare. He had thought of himself as weak, as a coward, as a traitor. Hearing Mary call him merciful changed something, made him see his choice differently, made him see himself differently. On the last day, Brown and Stigler went to a museum about World War II. They walked through the exhibits, looked at the planes, the uniforms, the photographs. They stopped in front of a B-17, the same model Brown had flown. Stigler looked at it, said, "I remember seeing your bomber, seeing the holes, seeing inside. I thought about how fragile it was, how human. All that metal and technology, and it was just a shell. And inside were men like me, men with families, men who wanted to go home. I could not kill them." Brown said, "You did not kill them. You saved them. There is a difference. Stigler said, yes, there is a difference. They exchanged addresses, promised to stay in touch, to visit each other, to not let another 47 years pass. Brown said, "You are my brother now, not by blood, but by something deeper. You gave me my life. That makes you family." Stigler said, "You are my brother too. You are the reason I do not regret my choice, the reason I know I did the right thing." They hugged again, said goodbye, flew home. But they did not stop talking. They called each other every week, wrote letters, visited each other's homes, met each other's families. Their wives became friends. Their children became friends. What started as a chance meeting became a lifelong friendship, a bond forged in war, strengthened by time, made permanent by choice. In 2008, both men died. Stigler went first, March 22nd. Cancer. He was 86 years old. Brown was at his bedside, held his hand, said thank you one last time. Stigler squeezed his hand, said thank you for finding me. Thank you for letting me know I made the right choice. Thank you for being my brother. Stigler closed his eyes, died peacefully, surrounded by family. Brown sat there, held Stigler's hand even after he was gone. Thought about December 20th, 1943, about the German fighter, about the blue eyes, about the choice that saved his life. Brown said goodbye, walked out of the hospital, went home. Brown died 8 months later, November 25th. Heart failure. He was 86 years old. His family was with him, his wife, his children, his grandchildren. Brown's last words were, "Tell them about Franz. Tell them about the choice he made. Tell them mercy is stronger than war," his family promised. They kept that promise. They told the story of the American bomber and the German fighter, the story of mercy in the middle of war, the story of two enemies who became brothers. The story spread. Newspapers wrote about it. Historians researched it. Books were published. The story that had been silent for 47 years became one of the most famous stories of World War II. In 2013, a book was published, A Higher Call. It told the full story. Brown's perspective, Stigler's perspective, the meeting, the friendship, the brotherhood. The book became a bestseller. Millions of people read it. People who had never heard of Brown or Stigler. People who did not care about World War II. They read it because it was not a war story. It was a story about humanity, about choice, about refusing to do what everyone expected, about choosing mercy when mercy seemed impossible. The book ended with a photograph. Brown and Stigler, standing together, arms around each other, smiling. Two old men, two former enemies, two brothers. The caption said, "Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler. Proof that even in war humanity survives. Proof that some choices matter more than victory. Proof that mercy is not weakness. It is the strongest choice of all."